Okay, welcome everyone. This is now session 7. So, in our last session, we had a look at creating a new dimension style for the floor plan, and we placed a few dimensions initially using one of the out-of-the-box dimension styles, and then we created our own, and then made some changes. So ultimately we've ended up with a dimension style that looks like this. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit more about placing dimensions, and then I'll get you to actually complete dimensions for the floor plan. What we'll do from there is I'll get you to then create some text types. I'll talk about the placement of text, and then you can continue working on the floor plan, adding all the text and leader notes. Were there any questions from our last session? Okay. So we put, I think everyone sort of put a few initial dimensions in up here on the northern side of the building. Now, just a couple of things with dimensions. When you're actually dimensioning, it's important that when you are placing dimensions, that you actually place them in or add them in a continuous run, so you don't stop and start. I mean, the thing is that you can stop and start, but what I'm getting at is that if I was to add a dimension here, or dimensions, continue this one here, rather than going to the dimension tool and starting from here and then going to here and here. So what I don't want to see basically is that one separate to that one. Okay, so if you are continuing a dimension that you've placed, then I would prefer that the dimensions be connected, so in other words not separate. So I'll just delete that one. Now when you're placing dimensions, or when you're adding to existing dimensions, the way to do it is to actually select the existing dimension, use edit witness line up here, and when you click that button, it allows you to continue from an existing. So here I can select the inside wall face and then go to the outside wall face and continue from there. So in this case, we're actually picking up on the walls down here. Now, if you have placed your dimensions like that, and you've looked back at your reference sheet and you've discovered that you've actually missed a dimension, so I've got the wall thickness here, but I should also have the 156 wall thickness here. So the thing is that if you have inadvertently missed a dimension, adding a dimension, don't select the whole dimension set and start again. Go back and click edit witness line, and what you can do is if you go back, in this case if you go down to the inside wall face here and click, it adds that dimension in. Now, if I wanted to remove that dimension, I can go back down to the same spot, inside wall face, and if I click it again, it removes it. So by clicking, you add, and by clicking again, you can remove. So you can actually manage your dimensions that way. So rather than starting again, remember the edit witness line. Will make it a lot easier to sort that out. So the idea is that whole string is one part, or one is all connected. The same with this 6700. So we're going to add some more dimensions to this one. So we click Edit Witness Line. Now, in this case, the first dimension is basically picking up on the width of the existing building. But down here, the dimensions that we're adding here are picking up on openings. So doors and windows. And typically when you're doing your dimension set out, the first set of dimensions on each side will invariably pick up on the openings in the building, i.e. windows and doors. And then basically the next set you might actually sort of pick up on the walls as you cut through them. So as you go deeper into the building, then you so the second set we're cutting through these walls here. If we go deeper into the building, we might pick up on these walls here, for instance, with our next set out. So as I say, the first set typically picks up the windows and door openings on each side. So again, the next set up here, so there's 4 sets in total. The next set up here is going to be from the outside wall face here. So again, remember to use the tab key to ensure that you're actually selecting the wall and not the deck. So then you're picking up on the wall face here and the wall face here, for instance, and placing that dimension up here. So just also remember the automatic dimension snap spacing. So when it locks in, you can feel it sort of sticking there. That's the correct placement. So it's vitally important that we get the dimensions spaced equally on all sides. Now the final set on this northern side is the deck itself, but again, if you select the deck itself, you'll get this centerline dimension, which I mentioned in our last session. So if you get this particular dimension with the CL, you'll need to just go back and just make sure that using your tab key you actually pick the wall and not the deck itself. From here picking the deck lines is fine. So here, I've actually picked the wrong line. So if I pick it again, it unselects it or deselects it, and then I can actually then go and pick the correct line here. And then this one here. Now, having a look, we go back to Learn into Part 2. You'll need to make sure that you are referring to the example floor plan here. So you'll note that above these dimensions is the word deck. Now, the way that you place this bit of text or incorporate it into your dimension is what you do is once you place your dimension, just double click on the text itself, and what you're able to do is actually in the text fields area here, you can actually place text above and below, left and right of the actual number. So I'll put this one above and click OK, and then when I click this one, I'll do the same thing. So that's how that text is introduced. Now the other thing that you'll need to do once you've placed your dimensions is you'll need to zoom in fairly close, and you need to just adjust some of these smaller dimensions, and in fact just move them up like so. And when you move them up, just make sure you untick leader up here. So that one's moved up. The next one, when you actually push it up, will actually lock into the same height as that one, as will this one and these. So it's just important to move these up to get them away from these witness line extensions, make them more central, and make them readable. Okay, so and it's only these ones here, these narrower ones, that you'll need to adjust, particularly the 90s. Okay, so that's that essentially is the that's the full set of dimensions on the northern side of this this building. Now, if we have a look back at the sample sheet, just to explain the dimensions on the western side here. So this first set here is going to pick up on the window, the louver window here. The second set here is essentially taking a cut through the building through here. So the second set is cutting through the building up through here. Okay, and in fact it actually cuts through. If you take a line through the building up through this way, right up to here, That's the second set. Now the third set picks up on the building width here. It then picks up on this window here, and that's where it stops. So that's from here across to here. Now the fourth set out cuts through the building through here. Through here. So it more or less sort of picks up on, cuts through there, and then it picks up on this wall here, the 156. And the last set, of course, picks up on the overall size of the extension, goes to the deck line and the deck line here. Now over on the other side, so the 610 here, from memory I think that picks up on the outside line here. We then go to the end of the wall here at 625, and then the 555 dimensions to the inside of this wall. Next set out, we sort of go from the inside here, we pick up on the wall cutting through here, and it stops here on the inside. So, and I guess the rest of it is fairly self-explanatory. So, with that in mind, I don't know if there's anything else that I need to explain about the dimensioning. So I'll let you just work through and just place your dimensions around the floor plane. So I'll give you a little bit of time to do that, and then you can have a look at the text. The only other thing to be aware of is when you're placing your dimensions, just make sure that before you place your dimensions that you are using the correct dimension style or type. This is the one we created in our last session. So just be mindful of that. What I don't want to see is a combination of this dimension style and one of the standard aerial styles. So in other words, the text size and the proportions of the dimensions are different because you've mixed up your dimension styles around the floor plan. So it needs to be consistent. Alright, so if you haven't quite finished your dimensioning, you can always come back to that. So up on screen I've got the floor plan fully dimensioned. So now the other important thing, of course, with your dimensions, the other question to ask is, are your dimension amounts the same as mine? So when you dimensioned to your objects, are you getting exactly the same values that I'm getting? Okay, so like I said in our last session, even if it's a millimetre out, it's not correct. Alright, so if you've actually drawn up your model correctly, when you dimension, you should be getting the same figures that I'm getting for all of my dimensions here. So please check that thoroughly, because it will be something that I'll pick up on and ask you to resolve if you haven't picked it up before your final submission. Just ensure that your dimension sets are relatively close to the building. You may need to move them out to accommodate text as you put it in. But as I say, looking at these dimensions here, we just need to place them so that we can actually just fit this section head in here. Same down here. also, of course, just ensure that you have all of the correct dimension snap spacing for all of your sets. So we're going to have a look at text now. And essentially, we're going to create 4 styles or 4 types for the project to accommodate the essentially the 4 heights or the 4 heights of text that you're likely to encounter. The majority of your text will be 2mm. I think some of it, or at least one of the notes, will be 2.5. Our room names, our room tags are 3mm, but we've actually added room tags as tags. But we will need to put in or add in the letters WIR for walk-in road using 3mm text. So we're going to create these 4 text types, all using this font that we've used in our dimension style. So in your project, in the standard template, as with dimension styles, you have got a number of pre-configured text types. And to have a look at those, if you go to the Annotate tab, we go to the text panel, click the arrow here to open up text types, and in the type list here, you'll see that there are quite a few already there. So we're going to, as I say, create 4 of our own based on the ISO font. And what we'll do is we'll start with the Arial 2mm, and we'll make a copy of that and then set up our text type. Now ultimately, I guess, because we're not going to use a lot of these pre-existing types, conceivably we could, at the end of the project, delete them from the project itself, just to purge them out so that we're not tempted to use them, or we don't use them by accident. So starting with the Arial 2, we'll duplicate and we'll put in, type in the name of our first text type. Being this one here. Now what we can do immediately is just change the font. I always just tend to type it in. The text size will remain at 2mm, and we're going to just adjust the width factor to 0.85. So just make those changes initially. So font and width factor. Okay, so just hold off for the moment. Don't create the other three just yet. There's a few other things that we have to consider within the text type. Now, perhaps the other main considerations here is the leader arrowhead. So if you click over here, you'll notice that as you scroll through, you've got quite a few choices there as an arrowhead style. So again, this comes down to personal choice, also perhaps as a company standard. We're going to stay with the 15-degree fill. The leader border offset basically determines, and probably I'll show you that when we actually place some leader text, but the leader border offset is the, I guess, the gap between the text and the start of the leader arrow. So that controls that. Now, transparent, the background there, transparent and opaque. I'll perhaps demonstrate how that works, but I generally prefer if we leave that as transparent. So I'm just going to OK that, and I'm going to place the word vanity over the vanity here in the bathroom. So when you're placing your text, use the text tool. Click where you're going to place it, knowing that you can always move the text afterwards if it's not in the right place. Now, I've made a fundamental mistake here, and more than likely this will catch you out as well. And I'll just exit that. Now, I've gone ahead and started placing my text, but I haven't actually selected the correct text type before I started. So the one we just created with this was the standard 2mm. So you just have to be careful that before you place your text, you actually make sure that you are using the correct type. So, type in your text, click the close button, hit the escape key. Now when you select the piece of text that you've just placed, the best option to move it around is the nudge technique. So what do I mean by nudge?
Using the arrow keys.
Using the arrow keys on your keyboard. So remember, arrow keys, if you hold the shift key down and use your arrow keys, it'll move much more quickly. Okay. So that piece of text is said to be transparent because we can see part of the geometry underneath. Now, if I was to select that piece of text and change its type properties to opaque, can you see the difference? See how the text has this mask around it, and it will actually mask out part of the object. So I would prefer, or I'm asking you not to do that, I'd rather you leave it transparent. With the understanding that when you're placing text, that you try not to put it over objects. Sometimes you have to because you've got a lot of text in a small area. So if you can move your text around so that it's not covering objects where you can, in this case that's fine. So text is transparent. The leader border offset, as I say, we'll actually reduce that. We'll come back to that, but if I just place another piece of text and perhaps I'll just move down to this area here. There's a piece of text down here that picks up on the reused 90 by 90 posts. When you are typing in your text, if you've got a few lines of text which you will encounter, please type the text out in a single line initially. And then if you have to force a new line, just use your drag arrows like this. Okay, so just keep your text, type it in one line, and then drag across if you have to make it wrap. Now, once you've typed a piece of text, let's say that I've typed that text in and I've realised that it needs a leader arrow. So what you can do, by the way, the text itself, if you actually have to move the text, you can actually do it by dragging the text like that. If you have to rotate text, you've got a little rotation control here where you can actually rotate the text if required. So that's how you get it vertical. Now, if you want to add a leader arrow, up here on the modified text notes, you've got these options here. So adding a leader to the right hand side, you can put one on the left hand side, you can put several of them. So you can just keep adding. Sometimes there might be a requirement to do that. The minus here will just remove the last leader place. So once you place the leader, you can then just drag it into position using the little dots here. Now, if you've got a situation like this where you want the leader to come off the end of the text here on the right hand side, what I would suggest you do is, as a rule, if the arrow is going to come off the left-hand side of the text, make text left aligned. If the leader's coming off the right-hand side, make the text align right. That way, it will come off the right-hand side like that. And it's important where you can to keep the, obviously keep this first part horizontal and the second part vertical where you can. Okay, avoid having the second part on an angle other than 0 degrees. And the other thing that's important about leader arrows is the arrow itself must be touching the object that it's describing. So it must be very close, like that. Okay? Please don't do that. Okay, because you've missed your mark. Alright, so it's describing that post. So take it up to the post, don't put it inside, just to the edge. So further to that, and my arrow thing, the second part of my arrow, the second segment's not straight. So just make sure that they are straight. So if they're not straight, you'll see a slight kink in them. Now, as I said before, the leader border offset, which is this 2 mil, is the distance between the end of the text and the start of the leader. So if we make that 1 mil, for instance, it just brings the start of the leader arrow closer to the text itself. So we'll do that. If you have to, I guess, if you've got your leader arrow in position like that, or if you've got your leader set up and your text and you're happy enough with the positioning and the length of the segments on the leader arrow, if you want to move it into its final position, again, select the whole thing and just nudge. Okay, so I'm just using my arrow keys on my keyboard to just nudge that into position. So it might be that you actually just nudge it in like that. So it's just touching. So there's a number of ways that you can, I guess, adjust or manipulate the leader arrow and the text itself. Okay, I'll just talk a little bit more about text before you start placing your text, but we'll stop for a break at this point. All right, so just a few more things with text. So when you're placing your text, when you're placing your text and you actually want to incorporate a leader arrow, the default is text with no leader. You can put in a 1-segment leader, a 2-segment leader, or a curved leader if you choose before you start placing the text. So if you know it's going to be a leader text with a leader arrow, you can actually choose one of these options here. I'll come to these in a minute. So 2-segment. So again, we're coming off the rainwater tank here, and So when you draw your first segment, take that one down if it's vertical, take it down and click and then go across. And it's always good practice if you're putting one piece of text underneath another like this, that you line up your arrows like this with an alignment path. Now it doesn't matter if you don't initially do that, we'll just stop it about there and then you can start typing your text. So I'll just so when you finish typing, you can either click away from the text to place it, or click the close button. And as I said, just hit the escape key a couple of times to get out of the text tool. Reselect the text, and then because the arrow is coming off the right hand side, as I said earlier, what I'll get you to do is change the alignment, paragraph alignment to right, and then when you bring this bubble in from the left, you then use that to force or to control your number of lines. So once you've placed your text, what I would expect you to do perhaps is just, we'll just move that one up slightly. With your text, once you've placed it, as you move it, it will automatically align. See how that's aligning with the piece of text above it? So I'm getting that alignment path. So that's what I would expect you to do, is line them up like that. Now, also, if you select your text like that, these controls up here will determine where the leader attaches to the text. So this is so bottom right, middle right, top right. So that controls that aspect of it. And then of course you just need to just make these, drag these out, just make the that first leader, first segment vertical. And you might drag that up a little bit closer to that one. So again, just sort of zooming, select the whole thing, and then use your arrow key on your keyboard just to nudge that up. And then that second, both of those pieces of text are nicely placed. The other thing you can do, of course, is if you're going to place a similar note on another part of the in another part of the view, and it doesn't even have to be a similar note if it's the same text size. Don't forget, you can use the copy tool. Okay, so select the text, this one down here, and copy, and just pick a point on the text itself as a base point, and then you could actually move that one up here. Just move it into position, and then you can adjust it from there. So you can sort of bring that down straight, bring that in, and double click on the text itself, and then you can actually edit the text and then, you know, reword it if you need to. So that's sometimes quicker than actually starting a new piece of leader text, but it's entirely up to you. Okay. You might find that there's you know, quite a bit. That's probably more complicated than actually starting a new piece of leader text. The other thing I'll just I guess show you or just point out, and by the way, that text in there is probably a little bit cramped. So what I would expect you to do is just select the dimensions and move them up, and select the text and move that up as well. And don't forget, when you're placing text, if it's all, you know, if you're going to place another piece of 2mm text, don't forget the create similar. So select an existing piece of text, create similar, puts you into the text tool with the same text type, and then you can sort of go on from there. Now the thing is that once you've set up your first text type and you're happy with all the aspects of that text type, it's then time to create the other three, which you haven't done yet. Okay, so we've got the standard 2mm text, that's this one here, but you will need to create 3 more. Okay, so standard 2.5, standard 3, and standard 5. So that they'll all be duplicates of the 2mm, and the only real change, or the only change, will be the font size. They'll all be width factor 0.85. They'll all use the same font. So before you go too much further, I'll get you to set up those additional 3 types. Now, just take note also, okay, the WIR is 3mm. So I'll make, just to let you know that all text, the majority of the text is 2mm. The only exceptions are the WIR, which is 3mm. These letters here, and see the words shower niche, shower and niche, 2.5. Alright, all the rest is 2mm. Shower niche, 2.5, the rest is 2. The letters WIR, 3mm. So once you've set up your text types, your other ones, I'll let you just work away and add all the text that's required.
What's the 5mm one for?
We may use that as a for a title text on a sheet, for instance, further down the track. So that essentially concludes today's session. So I guess by the end of today's session, we'll need to have all the text and dimensions in place. Now, in our next session, we will have a look at producing this legend, which is going to sit on the floor plan sheet. Once that's done, we have essentially completed all the components for the floor plan sheet. So what we're going to do next is actually move on and have a look at setting up or just continuing the demolition plan. So that requires a bit of line work and some notes. On from there, we'll then have a look at working on the site plan. So we're now sort of well into the project. All right. So as I say, if you haven't finished your dimensions and text in class today, I'll get you to finish them in your own time. I think most are probably pretty close now. So thanks everyone. If there's no questions, I'll sign off and we'll see you next session.
The section markings in the sections themselves, when do you want those putting in? We've got nothing in there at the moment.
The actual number, the section number and the A106, the A106 refers to the sheet that the section views go onto. So because we haven't put the section views onto a sheet yet, in fact we haven't worked on them yet, so it's not until the views go onto a sheet that, these numbers will appear in the section heads. So that's an automatic thing. So that's to come.
Thanks.
All right. Good question though. Okay. Thanks everyone. We'll see you next session.